Shabbat Shalom, friends. This week we are entering the Parashat of Parashat Behaalotecha, one of the largest parashiot in the whole Torah. And this week I'm going to say a few words concentrating on chapter 11, Perek Yud Aleph. So what happens over there? Moshe Rabbeinu is not necessarily struggling, but it's a hard task to lead the whole of Am Yisrael, all the Jews into the land of Israel while they're walking around the Midbar, the wilderness. So he speaks to God and says that he needs some assistance in leading and guiding the Jewish nation into the land of Israel. So Hashem, he suggests to bring in a Sanhedrin of 70 different people, with 70 different elders. And God instructs that this should be from the 12 different tribes, the 12 Shabbatim. So firstly, why 70 elders it's got to be? So the number 70 is a microcosm of the different nations in the world, which we learn in Parashat Noach. Also 70 different elders, the leaders, they all represent 70 different characteristics or personality traits, which could relate to all the people, the 600,000 people, and the mixed multitude that were walking in the wilderness. So another question strikes. They had to choose 70 people, but isn't it that from 12 tribes, if you want equal representation, you'll need 6 leaders from each of the tribes. That will come to 72. And in fact, God instructs that a lottery should take place where 70 leaders are going to be chosen from 72 people. So Moshe Rabbeinu was really worried about this, that there'll be a misrepresentation and 2 of the tribes will be shortchanged. There'll only be 5 representatives and they'll complain that there's a bias, it's not fair. So he was very, very stressed about it. So enter 2 people of the name, Eldad and Medad. They came from the tribes of Shvatim or Benjamin and Ephraim respectively. And they actually stepped aside and let the lottery take place where 70 people which were remaining will all automatically become the prophets. So why did they do this? Because they were so humble. They had such humility. They wanted to step aside so that the other 70 people will be selected, and they didn't feel they were worthy of it. And they stepped aside in greatness, which is a great attribute which they had. Another reason is, which is posed by Rashi, is that they were worried that 2 people potentially were going to be absolutely humiliated by not being chosen from this lottery, so they stepped aside. They were also naturally worried that it could be them that will suffer this huge humiliation. But this greatness of humility was not unrewarded at the end. These 70 elders that were chosen were prophets. They became prophets for a designated period of time, and God saw their humility and in turn gave them prophecy. And didn't just give them prophecy. When the other 70 stopped prophesying, they were still prophesying, and they were given a greater reward. So in fact, the tribes of Benjamin, and also Ephraim, they weren't shortchanged at all. They actually became the longest serving prophets at the end. And what's interesting, it says in Pirkei Avot, in chapter 4, there was a rabbi named Ben Zoma, and he posed a question. He says, who is a truly honored person? And in Ethics of the Father's answer, it's a person that runs away from the honor, that runs away from the kavod. And over here, these 2 people, Eldad and Medad, they ran away from the kavod. They didn't want to necessarily be the 2 people out of the 70 people selected. And in turn, they were rewarded with a greater honor than everyone else. We actually learn in the Torah, they teach us in Parashat Vayikra, that Moshe Rabbeinu, out of everyone, was the most humble person. And this very much was represented in one of the first few pasukim in Parashat Vayikra, where when God is communicating to Moshe, he writes the word Vayikra, but the last letter, the Aleph, is in a much smaller font, a smaller letter. And that represents the humility of Moshe Rabbeinu, which we see in that Parsha. So what's further interesting is, if we go back to the story of Eldad and Medad, they start prophesying at a longer period of time, and they actually, different commentators say that they predicted the war at the time of Moshiach that's going to come, and furthermore they actually prophesize that when Am Yisrael are going to come into the land of Israel and enter, that Moshe Rabbeinu potentially is going to pass away, and it's going to be Yoshua, who is going to take over as the leader of Israel. So automatically, when they were prophesying this out loud, the deputy of Moshe Rabbeinu, Yoshua, who would potentially take his place, was very, very angry and agitated and shouted to Moshe, take these people away. These two prophets are prophesying your downfall. They've got the prophet. They're not the main prophet, you are. So Moshe, in his phenomenal humility, he says to Joshua, no, leave them alone. It's halavai, and let's hope that everyone's going to become prophets and will prophesy and give prophecies. It shouldn't just be me. It should be, I hope that many, many people would be. And that was the beauty about Moshe Rabbeinu also. Just like Eldad and Medad, he was very much a microcosm of the definition of humility. He had that humbleness. And may we come inside our dealings, which we come in with throughout the week, with humility, but also at the same time with a self-pride at the same time. Not to be looking at ourselves totally downgraded, but have a humility in everything we do, but a comfortable humility, knowing that we really are worth something, and we really have the power to achieve greatness inside this world. May I wish you all a fantastic Shabbat, and enjoy this week's Parashat, because it's packed with so much mitzvot and so many different phenomenal storylines. I'd like to dedicate this to someone that sadly passed away last month. Her name was Ahuba Bat Chaya, and may this be Nishmat her, and let's all do so many mitzvot in her memory. I wish you all a fantastic Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom.